Hey guys and gals, thanks for joining me once again for another Bible drill. I'd like to drill for just a few minutes about the apostles. When we open up the New Testament and we read about Jesus, we read that Jesus certainly could have done all of the work that he did on his own, but that's not the way Jesus chose to do it. He chose to employ apostles, these special men who were called to do special work, and we see them carrying on that work even after Jesus left this earth. And so let's talk about the apostles. Let's begin with just, what does that word mean? Do you remember? We've talked about this before. What does the word apostle mean? The way that I've said to remember this is to just think about a penny. How much is a penny worth? It's worth 1 cent. And that's what an apostle is. An apostle is 1 cent, one who is sent forth to go and do a particular mission and work. And that's what Jesus has done. He's sent forth these men to do this special work. Now, let's remind ourselves of the names of all of these apostles. There were 12 of them. Let's see if we can remember them. Who's this first guy that starts with a P? Probably the most well-known. All right, that's Peter. And then his brother, whose name starts with an A, Andrew. Then there was another set of brothers. Do you remember them? Both of their names started with J. James and John. Then there was a man. Name starts with a P. Doesn't sound like a P. It actually sounds like an F. His name was Philip. And then there was the man whose name starts with a B, Bartholomew. Then there was this man down here at the bottom row, starts with an M, Matthew. And then this one whose name starts with a T. There's a couple that starts with a T. All right, this one is Thomas. And then whose name starts with an S? Simon. And then the other T guy, Thaddeus. And then the last two, both of their names start with a J. There was James, who is sometimes referred to as James the Less, possibly because maybe he was younger. And then the last was, Judas, probably the most notorious and infamous of all of the apostles, and we'll talk about him in just a few minutes. Now, when Jesus called Peter, Andrew, James, and John, he actually called them from their normal occupation and the way that they made a living. What did those four guys do for a living? Yeah, they were fishermen. They were just regular guys who worked with their hands and they fished. That was an important job in that day and time. That's how they were able to provide for their families. Now, interestingly, Jesus uses that idea of them being fishermen to make an important point with them. He told them that if they will follow him, he was going to make them into what? That's right. According to Matthew 4, verse 19, he was going to make them into fishers of men. He's going to use their skills that they already possess in being able to catch fish. Well, now I'm going to teach you how to catch people, so to speak. Help bring people to the Lord and help them to become followers of the Lord as well. Matthew, Jesus calls him from his occupation. Well, what was special about Matthew's job? What did he do for a living? Yeah, Matthew was a tax collector, which, much like Zacchaeus, meant that he probably wasn't very well liked, but Jesus wanted to use him, wanted to have a tax collector in his midst, and called him from that occupation, and now he's given all that up and the money that would have went along with that to be a follower of the Lord. We're told about Andrew. Andrew doesn't get a whole lot of attention by himself. Peter, his brother, kind of gets much of the spotlight in the Bible story, but we are told about an occasion where Andrew goes and finds a boy who has some food that's able to feed the large crowd of 5,000 people that had gathered there. How much food did this little boy have when Andrew went and found him? That's right, this little boy had 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and Jesus was able to take that little bit of food and perform a miracle to where they was able to feed the entire crowd of 5,000, and there was still plenty left over even after it was done. Now, Which three of the apostles does it seem like were the very closest friends of Jesus? There's several different occasions where Jesus does some things, and these three out of the 12 kind of get to be there with him up close and personal in a special way. Which of the three does it seem like Jesus was closest friends to? Yeah, Peter, James, and John seem to have a very close bond with Jesus. And that doesn't mean that Jesus loved them more or that he loved the other 9 even less. It just means that Jesus, just for whatever reason, had a closer relationship with them. That's true in most of our friendships. I have lots of friends, but then I have a smaller group that would be considered really, really close friends. And Jesus was really no different in that respect. Let's talk about Peter, because Jesus had a very special relationship with Peter as an apostle. Peter very famously messes up on a number of different occasions. Look at these pictures and let's talk about some of the ways that Peter messed up. What about in that first picture? What's going on in that first picture on the left? How did Peter mess up there? Yeah, when Jesus was walking on the water, Peter wanted to get out and walk too, and Jesus said, "Come to me," and he did walk on the water for a few moments, but then he took his eyes off of Jesus. His faith diminished, and he began to sink, and he nearly drowned until Jesus saved him. What about in that second picture? Boy, that's kind of a disturbing picture. What's going on there? What did Peter do there? That's right. When Jesus was being arrested, Peter pulled actually a knife or a sword out and actually swung it at the soldier's ear, and he ended up cutting off the guy's ear. And thankfully, Jesus was there to clean up that mess once again, and he put the guy's ear back on his head and restored him. That just shows kind of the way that Peter was, just kind of acting out of turn. What about that last picture? What does that remind you of in Peter's life and a failure that he made? Yeah, the rooster in the background is kind of the giveaway, and that is when Peter ended up denying Jesus not once, not twice, but 3 times. He denied the Lord, and then he heard the rooster crow, and he knew that he had actually done what he said he wouldn't do, and that is deny Jesus before others. Peter messed up a lot of different times, but he always repented and always came back around, and the Lord helped him to be better from those mistakes. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he had some special time with the apostles, and we're told of at least a couple of things that he did with them in that upper room. What are those? There's 2 pictures there. What do those pictures tell us about what Jesus did with them that night? What about that first one on the left? Yeah, Jesus got a towel and got a basin of water, and he washed the apostles' feet. And those guys, since they're walking around probably in sandals or maybe even barefoot, their feet would have been dirty from walking around all day on dirt roads and in the mud. But Jesus wanted to show them what it means to be a servant and to serve others, and he washed their feet, all of them. And then what about on the right? What was he doing there? That's right. He established the Lord's Supper. As he was partaking of the Passover meal with them, he used that as an opportunity to establish his special meal, his supper that was to be commemorated for all time. In fact, even to this very day, we still remember and commemorate the Lord's Supper as we memorialize Christ's great sacrifice. Judas, of course, gets up from the table, and he goes out and he ends up betraying Jesus. Do you remember how much money he betrayed Jesus for? Yeah, we're told that it was 30 pieces of silver that he was paid for betraying Jesus over into the hands of the Jewish authorities. And we don't know exactly how much that silver was worth, but one person estimated that if those shekels of silver was temple shekels, then what that would equate to in our money today would be a little more than $20. That's just not very much. And the truth is, even if Judas had been paid $1 million, or $100 million, or $1 billion, or $1 trillion, it's still not enough. No amount of money is the right amount of money to betray Jesus. Now, of course, after realizing the wrong thing that he had done, Judas goes out and hangs himself, which means we've now only got 11 apostles. And so, who was later chosen to replace Judas? Who was chosen to be the replacement as the 12th apostle? What was his name? All right, Matthias. We read in Acts chapter 1, and we really don't know much else about Matthias other than just what's told in that one chapter, but he replaces Judas. Now, we're told a little bit later that someone else is called to be an apostle, kind of a 13th apostle, if you will. But who else is called by the Lord to be an apostle? That's right. Saul, who later becomes known as Paul, he becomes an apostle for the Lord, and he is sent forth to do the Lord's work. Which of the apostles wrote these books? He wrote one of the Gospels that bears his name. He then wrote 3 letters, 3 different epistles that bear his name, and then he also wrote the book of Revelation. Which one of the apostles wrote those 5 books? Which one did that? Right, all of those books are attributed to the Apostle John. And he's not the only one who did some writing, but he wrote those 5 books of the Bible. One more question. Let's talk about Peter once again. The Apostle Peter is credited really with preaching the first gospel sermon. Do you remember what special day that was when he preached the first gospel sermon and 3,000 people were baptized into Christ? What day was that? That's right. That was the day of Pentecost. That was a special holiday for the Jews, and there was many people gathered in Jerusalem, and Peter preached to them, and we have this beginning of the church as so many people become obedient to the gospel, and they become Christians, and the church officially begins. Let's conclude with this in Mark 16, verse 15, because these are the words that Jesus spoke to the apostles. This is the Great Commission. This is what they were told to go and do. Jesus said, "Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation." And that started in Jerusalem with Peter on the day of Pentecost, but then it expanded to the whole world. See if you can help me fill in the blanks now. Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. How about now? Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. That was the charge that was given to those apostles in the beginning, and we continue to do that even to this day so that we can help others to become Christians. Thanks for listening, guys.